Mr. Chairman, we can now have Mr. Fenton back.
Yes, there he is.
There he is.
All right, Mr. Fenton, ready to carry on?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you. Yes,
Mr. Fenton, can I take you to your witness statement again and go back to page 6? And I want to just take you to the middle of page 6, which sits in a part of your statement after the first part of page 6, which deals with your brief to Jason Olive. And you can see in the first part of that page that you cover your brief to him, whiteboards, etc. And then you describe the procedure. And then you come in the middle of that page to say this: I was advised by Control, or Jason Olive, I'm not sure which, that crews were struggling to get beyond the 15th floor of the tower. Now, can I just ask you, when do you think you were told that by Control or Jason Olive?
Quite early in the time in the morning that I was there, so quite shortly after my arrival.
Right, shortly after your arrival. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't phrase that probably the easiest way.
No, that's okay. I just want to try and get a time frame for that. And are you sure that it was the 15th floor?
Yeah, I'm pretty comfortable it's the 15th floor.
Right. Joanne Smith says she thinks it might have been the 18th floor, but accepts that it could have been the 15th floor. Do you have a recollection?
I mean, from memory, I would say it's the 15th floor,
okay.
But I could be wrong.
Right. Now, you then say, in the next sentence, there is a small television in the control room. Joanne Smith said she didn't want it on due to the stress with all the FSG calls and did not want it distracting her staff. I went with that decision. There was no necessity for the control room officers to see what was going on. At the same time, I knew that there would be a television downstairs in the BCC for me to get a visual picture as the Deputy Assistant Commissioner. Now, what would the television in the control room usually be used for?
I've been to control at Merton, and there's two large screens, top of my memory, and that is from memory. And they would just be on in the background. So I think one of the TV screens normally has an update, says that strategic resource has been released, or that, information of what's happening with RMC and the day-to-day running resources. And sometimes I've been down there and the other television's been on and it's had news in the background, and other times it hasn't been on at all.
Right. Would the television being on be useful to control room officers and control room supervising officers and managers in the carrying out of their functions?
As in what aspect?
Well, would seeing what is on the television, on the news feed, part of the television, be useful to assist control room officers or supervisors to carry out their jobs?
So it wouldn't be for me to say, not knowing exactly their jobs and their roles. However, I had that conversation with Joanne. Joanne said that it wasn't necessary. She didn't want the control staff to have the television on and further distress them while what they were doing. That's her environment and she runs the control, so I went with her decision.
Okay.
Now, myself being an operational officer, I'm not used to being remote from an incident, and personally I wanted to give myself a pictorial view, and that's why I wanted to have a look at the television downstairs.
Right. Mm-hmm. Did Jo Smith tell you that the TV was broken?
No.
Right. Did you get the impression that it wasn't broken, but that she just decided that it shouldn't be on?
There was no question whether the TV was broken or not broken. No one, that was not raised or mentioned in any conversation.
Okay. And when you say in your statement there was no necessity for the control room officers to see what was going on, was that your decision or thought at the time, or was that what Joanne Smith told you was her view?
No, that was the view of what Joe was saying for the control officers.
Right.
So that's obviously their protocol.
Okay. Now, can I go back to this question of the whiteboard and what was logged and what wasn't logged, which we looked at shortly before the lunch break? In your statement on page 6, just go back above the paragraph which we looked at a minute ago. You say, a quarter of the way down, I told him, that's Jason Olive, to sit by the boards and we would bring the information to him. He would then write the information on the boards and tell the command unit at the same time. And then you say the information included flat numbers, floor numbers, amount of people inside the flat, including the numbers of adults and children, and any progress that came from the calls coming in. Just taking that list in order, was it important for the information being recorded on the whiteboard to record flat numbers, particularly?
So the information, the priority, the most important part is that the right information goes to the incident ground.
Yes.
So, but yes, it is beneficial to ensure that the information on the whiteboard is correct.
And also the amount of people inside the flat. Would that be important for the incident ground to know?
Yes.
Yes. And so, would that reflect the fire survival guidance information gathering that you would expect a control operator to gather from the caller?
It's my perception that yes, that is part of the information gathering that a control operator will do, yes.
And you did tell us earlier that you're not familiar with policy 539, but so I won't put it to you. But would you know from your training or experience that relevant information to be passed to the incident ground should include number of persons involved, condition of the location, so smoke, heat, fire, etc., and proximity to the fire, location of caller within premises, and the latest FSG advice, things like that?
Yes, that is relevant information.
Right. And going to a policy you said you were familiar with, if I can just show you, policy 790 again, which is in tab 5 of the policies bundle. I just want to show you that. We looked at it earlier, Mr. Fenton. I just want to go back to this, and this time look at paragraph 5.4 and 5.5 on page 4. No. Yes. Page 3, I'm sorry, page 3. Now 5.4 says control will contact the initial command pump, ICP, and pass the information below by appliance radio for each separate FSG call. When passing this information, control will reference the information using the relevant flat or house number. Now, never mind by radio for the moment. We've covered that. Just looking at the list of information in 5.5 that must be passed to the ICP by control, it says this: control will attempt to gather all the information on the control information form, Appendix 2, and relay this information to the incident as and when it becomes available. And then you see a list: number of flat, house, number of persons, location of caller within premises and access point, condition of their location, heavy smoke and slight smoke, proximity of fire if known, latest advice given by control, time of FSG call, and time updated. On the night, were you aware, was it in your mind, that control had to gather that information from the callers if they could?
Yes, that is the information that's in policy, and that's the information you'd expect control to gather.
Right. And would you expect them to use the control information form at Appendix 2? We can look at the appendix. In doing that?
I don't know the protocol which control would normally utilise or do, so
Right.
unfortunately, no, I can't answer that.
When you tasked Jason Oliff with the whiteboard job, if I can use a shorthand, did you remind him of the need to ensure that all those items of information listed in paragraph 5.5 were gathered by the control room operators and recorded on the whiteboard?
So I gave Jason Oliff, as we said, a brief and
Right.
of what was needed to do. I can't recollect word for word exactly what the brief was and what I told him, but I would say that it was along that lines, yes.
Right. When you looked, if we can just now have the two whiteboards up on the screen, 68 and 69, tab 68 and 69 of the documents bundle, there they are. When you looked at the information as it was going down onto the whiteboard, were you satisfied that the control room operators had gathered all that information required by policy and passed it to Jason Oliff?
So I was satisfied that the information was going across. However, like I stated previously, it's not my role to get involved with the control operators or to speak to the control operators. So this was an additional system that we put in place to cover on the night. So far as I was aware on the night, the right information was going across via Jason Oliff.
Now, what steps did you take to ensure, just taking it in stages,
Yeah.
what steps did you take to ensure that the control room operators gathered all those items of information that policy requires, number of flat, persons involved, etc.?
I did make those steps because, as I said, it's not my role to... I wouldn't have checked with the control operators to check what information they're gathering. So normally, I wouldn't be working in control. This was over and above and outside my normal role. So I was there assisting, and it wouldn't be my role to normally go around the control operators.
Whose role would it be?
It'd be down to Joanne Smith in charge of control.
And when you... OK, next question then. Did you get a chance during your observations to check to see what the information was being recorded by control room operators on the pieces of paper that you saw being carried to the whiteboards?
So no, because like if I can set the scene again and wind you back to the position that I was in at that time and on the night, there was a multitude of phone calls, people requesting information from myself, asking me for updates on resources, the BCC, all different parts of information. I tasked the job to be done by a station manager, and that's the task I expected to be performed. So,
Did you... Sorry.
Yeah, no, fine.
I'm so sorry. Did you oversee the way in which he was carrying out that task?
At times, I would come over and confirm and say, is the information going across? Is the right information going across? That's as far as that probably went at that time. Because, as I said, it was very dynamic and everyone was completely full on with a task with numerous calls and information coming in non-stop.
Looking at these whiteboards, and let's just take the very first entry we see on the very first of the whiteboards, 82, 11th floor. Now, I tried with Jason Oliff yesterday to read this. It looks like bed front door, or bad front door, I'm not sure. Can you help with that?
No.
Okay. 2 adults, 1 child, outside something. If that was the totality of the information that Jason Oliff was given, did that reflect Control's attempt to gather all the information that policy requires?
So I would say that the information on the board is not necessarily the information that was passed over on the board, over on the mobile phone. So I spoke to Jason and he confirmed that everything, all the information that needed to go across was going across via phone. Whether the boards have changed through the night, so whether some information has been updated, changed or removed through the course of the incident, I really couldn't give you that information.
Right. And it's clear from this that although we get the floor and the flat, we don't get location of caller within premises and access point, which is one of the items of information to be gathered and sent to incident. That's right, isn't it? Just looking at the whiteboard, you don't get that.
If you were to take what's written on the board, yes.
Nor do we get proximity to fire if known.
If that's the information that control would normally gather.
Right. Nor indeed the latest advice given by control or the time of the FSG call or the update.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Nor the latest advice given by control. We don't get.
Sorry.
So we don't see from the whiteboard either that we get the latest advice given to the caller by control.
Like I say, I can't tell you why or what advice or what was written on the board. The information came across on the pieces of paper, and then the board was used as a recording process to say what information had gone or that the flat had actually been sent across.
What instruction did you give to Jason Olive to record the detail of any given call, such as fire coming through the window, thickness of smoke, occupants unable to breathe? What general instruction did you give him to record that?
As I mentioned previously, I gave Jason Olive the task of passing the fire survival guidance information to the fireground and recording the information on the board that control was passing over to him.
Right. Let me work this then through by means of an example, and it is just an example if I can. Flat 194, if you take the clutch of documents that you produced, we looked at this morning, the bits of paper you gathered up at the end of the night and put in the envelope you then gave to the police. I just want to show you two of those. 17390, page 10. And that says, next to 194, 20-second heavy S, which must be smoke. Okay? And then there's another document like this referring to flat 194 at page 19. You just go to that. Same relativity document, page 19. Flat 194, 22nd floor, no reply from friend. Now, in fact, there were three calls made in respect of that flat to control. And then when you look at the whiteboard for that flat on the left-hand whiteboard, should be the left-hand whiteboard, 194, you get 22nd floor, heavy smoke, one adult. It looks as if, it's hard to tell where one adult comes from because we haven't seen the reference to one adult in the pieces of paper. But the first question I suppose I have to ask you is, do you think the pieces of paper were complete when you swept them up and put them in the envelope?
No, I would certainly say that I didn't gather. That was just the pieces of paper that I managed to locate by the board. So I couldn't confirm that was all the pieces. Definitely not. So
can you help us with where Jason Olive got the one adult from?
No, I can't.
No, you couldn't either.
I can't.
Okay. And on the piece of paper on the right of the screen, you see no reply from friend. It looks like some new information. It doesn't look like it's recorded on the whiteboard against that flat.
So
can you help with that?
Yeah,
About why that might be?
I mean, I wasn't privy to seeing all these pieces of paper. I wasn't standing by the board and putting the information on the board. And so the board was continuously updated, information was coming across, and as I said, I had other roles and other jobs that I was dealing with at the time. Jason Olive been sort of allocated that role. He's a station manager, he's a competent station manager, and I would have expected him to perform that role.
Right. If that was the totality of the information about flat 194, and it is only an example by Jason Olive, based on the two pieces of paper we've seen, is it the case that Control was not gathering all the information and relaying it through Jason Olive to
I
the
can't
command
answer that
unit?
question for you, can I?
Do you think that the gathering of information, well, let me ask it this way, what instruction did you give to Jason Olive to ensure that all the information in accordance with policy should be gathered and recorded?
As I've mentioned previously, I gave Jason a brief, asked him to gather the information that Control passed across, to put onto the dry whiteboard, and to make sure all the information went across to the fire ground directly. Now, the board could have changed, the information could have changed through the night, there could have been additional pieces of paper. I was in multiple locations with multiple roles and multiple decisions to make, and I did not stand by the board for the duration of that night.
Can I ask you this? When you gave the instructions to Mr. Olive,
Yes.
did you tell him to check that the information he got from the control room operators covered all the heads of information that the policy suggests they should have included?
So the control operators weren't bringing the pieces of paper
No,
over.
my question is, did you give him
No.
instructions
No.
to check up on the control?
No, I didn't. So
room
I wouldn't have asked Jason to double check with Control, because my expectation is that the right information would have been coming across. Otherwise, that would have caused a further delay with another double checking the information. So you had the information going one way, then you'd be checking going back the other way before you relaying the information across.
Right, thank you.
Now, this is the system to record information coming or going to the incident ground.
Yes.
Do you know what, if any, information was coming from the incident ground?
I was not made aware of any update or information that came from the fire ground apart from where I mentioned in the 15th floor.
Yes.
That crews were struggling to get past the 15th floor.
Yes. But that, you say, came from Control or Jason Olive?
Yes, via the incident ground.
Right. Do you know who it was on the incident ground who sent that information into the control room?
It would have come, I would take the assumption, from a command unit, so all information or all correspondence will go via command unit to Control.
Right. Did you take steps to ask Jason Olive or anybody else in the control room to press the incident ground for what was happening operationally at the incident ground?
Not at the time. So I would have. I was waiting, or an informative message is the way that we give updates on the incident ground. So I would have expected an informative message to come back from the incident ground to give us an update.
Would an informative message system be useful or appropriate given the volume of fire survival guidance calls and the number of people in the building needing assistance? So
an informative on the night, I would suggest that everyone was fully engaged in operations, and to have time to formulate or get that message back. I'd surmise, because I wasn't on the incident ground, that it took time before the incident commander was in a position to send that back.
We have in the short incident log an example of an informative message. I'll just show it to you.
Yep.
It's tab 23, page 23 of the short incident log. And this is, I think, the second third informative message we've got on the night. The second one being about Group Manager Welch. But at 2:43:03, informative, and there you can see it. It's a list of I suppose, events or facts. SUP CU8 from DAC O'Loughlin, a residential block of flats, 27 floors, 25 metres by 25 metres. Fire on all floors from 2nd to 27th floor. Large number of persons involved. FSG calls being dealt with. Major incident declared. High-rise procedure implemented. TL, ALP, EDBA, main control, FSG, ground monitor, 5-jet, safety cordon in place, tactical mode, Oscar. Now, as a summary of everything, someone like you would be able to interpret that. How useful would informative message like that as a system of communication be in order for the incident ground properly and fully to tell control what was happening in respect of each fire survival guidance call?
For the number of calls that we had on the night, I think that would have been I don't think that would have been feasible for them. The fire survival guidance calls were coming in so thick and fast that I don't think there'd have been an opportunity for them to give us an update. And like I say, I wasn't on the incident ground, so I'm only making the surmising of what the position they would have been on the incident ground.
Putting yourself in the shoes and using your experience of being an operational officer on the incident ground, did you have any thoughts on the night as to what sort of information you as an incident commander would have wanted control to know about fire survival guidance in progress?
To be honest, at the time and on the night, that wasn't a thought process. We were so busy just dealing with the incoming calls and the number of calls coming in that I just don't think anyone had time to even step back and think of anything else apart from dealing with what was coming into us. The amount of information and the amount of calls coming into control was just relentless.
Certainly. My question really is this, that because you had operational experience and you told us a number of times not really control room experience, but from an operational point of view, being in the control room, did it occur to you at any time to think to yourself, I need to know what's going on the ground so that I can tell the staff in the control room to tell the callers what's happening?
So, yes, I was after a visual picture of what was happening on the incident ground. So that's why I went down to look at the monitor screen in the BCC to get that visual overview of what was happening on the incident ground.
It's not really your question, is it, Mr. Millett?
No, it wasn't.
You're really asking Mr. Fenton to imagine that you're the incident commander.
Yeah.
Imagine you were on the ground. What information you would like control room to have to help them do their job properly.
So in an ideal world, I would have, as an incident commander, yes, I would have liked control to have an update on where all the fire survival guidance calls were.
Yes.
I can't say how the incident ground or where the incident ground was to be able to do that or not do that.
Instead of waiting to receive informative messages such as that, what was to stop you thinking in that way, using your airwave radio or some other means of communication and saying, get me the incident commander, I want to know what's happening with the crews?
So it wouldn't be appropriate for me in my role to contact the incident commander on the incident ground. So there is a commander chain and how a command chain works. The incident deals with the incident. My role where I am remote and in the BCC and in control, it's not for me to contact the incident commander directly. An incident commander has many spans of control, loads of information coming in. If remote officers start phoning the incident commander, that's going to detract him from what he's trying to deal with on the incident ground. So, and I wouldn't use the airwave radio to contact the incident commander because that would block the airwave for further traffic going on. So, control have I believe, an alert that comes up on their system which would then tell them to ask the incident ground for an informative or an update.
Did you not ask yourself how it was that control room operators could accurately advise callers without actually knowing what was going on the incident ground at the time?
So at the time, we were dealing with the information that had come in, and like I say, it wasn't for me to start prompting the incident ground for an update on where we were on the incident. At the time, we were, like I said, we were just inundated with information coming in, so we were dealing with that.
You say it wasn't for you. Who was it for?
That would be for the monitoring officer or via control.
Well, okay, who was the monitoring officer? Do you mean the monitoring officer on the incident ground?
So to ensure that the right information is coming back.
So was your way of thinking is to leave it to them to volunteer the information to you?
No, because it wasn't something that crossed my mind at the time, as I said, because we were so busy dealing with what we were dealing with at the time. So it's not a consideration that crossed my mind at the time.
You were very busy sending information to the fireground. Did you not want to know what was happening to it?
Yes, and that is, so I went down, and like I said, I was trying to gather a visual picture myself to get an understanding of what was happening on the incident ground.
And that's a visual picture that you looked at on the television downstairs in the control room. But that would have given you a visual picture of what? The outside of the building?
Yes.
What would it have told you about the smoke, fire and heat conditions within the building?
No, it wouldn't have given me that information. That
information couldn't it, have come from the incident ground?
So, yeah, I didn't ask the incident ground, and we didn't ask the incident ground for that information.
Why? Really, the question I think I've got is why, given that you were interested to know what the building looked like from the outside, why weren't you interested to pursue detailed information from the incident ground as to what was happening on the inside?
As I said at the time, I can only say that we were task orientated with what was happening, and that wasn't something that crossed my mind at that time.
Having been told that the crews couldn't access the building above the 15th floor, did you seek to find out why that was? So
we were told that crews couldn't get above the 15th floor, and that is the actual time and period that me and Joe had that discussion, and we discussed changing the stay put.
Yes, my question was why? Did you seek to find out why crews couldn't access the building above the 15th floor?
So I took the assumption they couldn't access any further because of the fire itself.
You assumed that, but did you not take steps actually to ask the question of those who were present on the incident ground?
No.
Why is that?
It didn't come to me to ask that question at the time.
And assuming that it was the fire, as you call it, would that mean, just thinking about it, would that mean fire in the stairwell itself, in the means of escape?
So we were told that they couldn't get through above the 15th floor because of the heat and smoke. That's as far as the information I had come back from the incident ground at the time.
And you didn't seek to interrogate it?
I didn't pursue it, no.
Can I just ask you a specific question? So, supposing a resident had called from a particular flat, but then had been moved by fire crews into another flat on the same floor or on a different floor. Suppose that had happened. Was there a system in place by which the control room could be updated as to the physical location of that person?
So, yet again, you're asking me a question that I wasn't involved in that process. So, yes, if the fireground came back or the control got told that there was a change of the change of the location, I would have expected that to come from the control operator to the Jason Olive to put up onto the board and relay that information back to the fireground.
Right, you would have expected that, but did you give Jason Olive instructions to tell the incident ground that that is what they should be telling him?
So I wouldn't expect to tell Jason Olive he's a qualified station manager, and I'd expect him to perform that role. So he would have given that information across.
Right. So was there a system, I'm talking generically, in the control room with the whiteboard information recording to record movements of individual occupants from one place in the building to another?
So, yeah, as I said, so the information came to Jason and it was changed. I would expect Jason to have updated or changed the board and relayed that information back to the incident ground.
Right. Can I then ask you to look at page 7 of your statement? A third of the way down, you say, whilst I was in the BCC, when Steve was setting it up, I saw that the television was switched on. It was the first time that I had a visual picture of the tower from Sky News. One side of the tower was fully engulfed in fire, with flames coming outside the windows. It had escalated from a flat fire to a building fire very quickly. The television switched on. Was it on when you arrived?
No, it wasn't on when I arrived, but when I came down to the BCC to check on Steve to see how he was setting up, that's when he had Sky News on.
Oh, right. Did he put it on, do you think?
I take the assumption he put it on. I don't know who actually turned it on down there.
And you... okay. Now just to get a time point on that, Steve... This is Steve Leader.
Yes.
I'm assuming Steve Leader. But he, I think, arrived at incident control. Do you know when he arrived?
I've put a time in my statements.
Yes.
I couldn't be specific where that timing came from, so...
Yes, you say, that, I mean, just mainly to get back to it, at the bottom of page 6, you say, at 2:30 hours, Steve Leader arrived at Stratford. So I'm assuming that that's right. Did you look at the television only after he arrived, i.e. only after 2:30?
It would have been after 2, it would have been when Steve was down there, yes.
Right, okay. So we can pinpoint reasonably well the time at which you saw what you saw on the television.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Now, you say it was fully engulfed in fire and had escalated from a flat fire to a building fire very quickly. Is that, when you saw the television, is that the first time you were aware of those things?
I was very surprised to see the external envelope of the building, the amount that was alight. I've never in my career seen a fire travel or move that fast around the external envelope of a building.
And you say very surprised. Do you mean that you were surprised at the... Do you mean that this was, as it were, career first, experience first, or were you surprised that you'd not been told before that of the conditions?
It was a career first for me to see. At this stage, I think I've only been there 5 minutes or just recently arrived.
And you then go on to say in the next paragraph, I went back up to the control room and told Joanne Smith what I'd seen on the television, with it showing the tower fully engulfed in fire. We also had the information that crews were unable to go above the 15th floor. And you then go on to say, and we'll come to it in some more detail in a minute, but that you changed the stay put advice. Is it what you saw on the television that effectively operated on your mind to agree with her to change the advice?
It was a combination. So it was that crews couldn't get past the 15th floor. It was my pictorial view and understanding of what was actually happening on the incident ground being remote, and also with the information that Jo was giving me with her side of the amount of fire survival guidance coming in, and she also mentioned the length of call.
Right. Now, you say at that time there had not been, you go on in your statement, you say, not been an informative message from the incident ground. And just going back to the short incident log, we can see the informative, we looked at it a minute ago, on page 23, coming in at 024203. So can we pinpoint this discussion with Joe Smith you had about stay put at between 2:30, which is when Steve Leader arrives, you say in your statement, and 2:42,
Yes.
12-minute period?
I would suggest so, yes.
Right, that's very helpful. So, you then go on to say, Joanne is experienced in FSG calls and has experience from the Lackell fire. So I asked for her advice and views. And that's how it was it? You said to her...
Joanne's a very experienced control operator, has worked in control a long time.
Right.
I know she had involvement in the Lackell fire and had involvement with fire survival guidance calls at that time. With it being her environment, I was after her experience and her understanding,
Right.
coupled with the information that I was also bringing.
Okay, and you go on to say, following a discussion around what I saw on the TV, the information on the crews unable to get above the 15th, and the large number of FSG calls being taken by control, we both agreed that the advice needed to be changed. It was at that point that the advice changed. Now, just in terms of those three ingredients, discussion around what you saw on the TV, information on the crews being able to get above the 15th, and large number of FSG calls, let's just take each of those, as it were, in reverse order. Is it right that you knew about the large number of FSG calls when you arrived?
So I knew, yes, that there was fire survival guidance calls.
So you already knew that. You told us earlier that the information on the crews being unable to get above the 15th floor was something that you learnt pretty soon after arrival, if not on arrival. Is that right?
It's pretty close to
pretty close to arrival. So would it follow then that it was what you saw on the TV that tipped you over the edge, as it were, to go to Joe Smith and say, what is your advice on stay put?
So it was the catalogue of all of these informations coming together, and the final part was the pictorial view of the incident, and that's when I went straight upstairs back from the BCC to speak to Joe in control, and that's where we had that discussion.
My question really is, was seeing what you saw on the TV the influencing factor that led you to go and seek her advice?
For me as an operational officer, that pictorial view, yes.
So without seeing the television view of the tower on fire, would you have gone back to Joe Smith and said, I think we need to change the advice, or what's your advice about the stay put advice?
I don't know. I can't answer that question. I mean, that's the events that happened on the night.
Yeah. I mean, really, I'm asking the same question a different way. Is seeing what you saw on the television something that made all the difference?
Yeah, for me to have that pictorial view, yes.
Right. Now, Joanne Smith gave evidence, and she says that it was she who made the decision to change the policy and change the stay put advice. Do you remember that?
So we had a discussion, and we mutually discussed the information that we both had together, and we both agreed that the advice needs to be changed. I suppose you could say in her role as the in charge of control, that's her role and decision to be made.
Right.
I helped come to that conclusion. I would suggest that my information and advice helped come to that final decision.
Right. What advice did you give her?
As we've just said about the 15th floor, about having a view of my overall view. So that was the information we've just discussed.
Did Joe Smith, to your way, did you know whether Joe Smith knew or didn't know about the 15th floor?
I can't honestly remember. I mean, I mentioned it to her, whether she was aware of that or not aware of that at that time. I can't remember in the conversation.
Right. Okay. You then say it was at that point that the advice changed. On making the decision, Joanne went round the control room and told all the control room officers of the change in advice and to tell people to get out of the tower. First of all, is that sentence describing the change in advice?
No, that's probably how I've written that. What advice Joe told her control operators, I don't know the exact advice, what she's told them. So she went round and dealt with, and I think Alex Norman was with us or involved at that time as well. So I think between Joe and Alex, the control operators are their staff, so they would have gone round the room and spoken to their staff.
Right. Do you remember, do you remember calling the incident ground about whether or not to change the advice?
So I know on the night I made absolute numerous phone calls coming in and going out, and I do have a memory of calling the fireground and asking the fireground how they felt about changing the advice, and they agreed. And when I say they, unfortunately, I honestly can't remember who I called and who I spoke to, but I would suggest it would have been CU8, which is the command unit on that night.
CU8, not CU7?
No, so CU7 would have been dealing with the FSGs. That information was still relayed to CU7. However, to start with, it would have been a discussion I would want to have with the incident commander. Whether I spoke to the incident commander direct, I would suggest not, but I mean, I may be told it was different by phone records, I'm not sure. But my memory is, and what protocol would be for us to speak to the command unit, who the incident commander is on, so that it keeps the spans of control and the phones not ringing of the incident commander, so that the command unit would pass that information straight to the incident commander. Otherwise, the incident commander could be inundated with phone calls from numerous external staff asking for information.
Right. Now, there is some evidence that the inquiry has received, which we haven't yet looked at, from a group manager, Stephen West. First of all, do you recall the involvement, or any involvement, of Group Manager West on the night of the fire?
I don't remember speaking to Steve West. I do know Steve West, but
right.
as I say, I can only apologise. The amount of phone calls I had that night, I can't sit here and recollect and go through every single conversation. It must have been in hundreds of the amount of phone calls I received.
No, I understand. And this is not a memory test, but
yes.
Let me see if I can just jog your memory a bit more. Okay. Group Manager West recalls, or says he recalls, and we'll obviously have to explore this with him when he comes to give evidence, if he comes, that he took a call from you seeking permission from the commissioner, to the actual commissioner, Danny Cotton, to change the stay put advice. That's what he remembers. Do you remember that?
I don't remember that call, but I'm not saying that call didn't happen. I just unfortunately can't bring that back to memory.
Right. And he says, and again, this may trigger something, maybe not, but he says that he was in a meeting with the commissioner, with Assistant Commissioner Rowe and some other people when he took that call. Does that help? You remember?
Like I say, there's just so many numerous calls on the night, and I'm pretty sure that did happen, but unfortunately there are parts of the evening or morning that I just can't remember.
Right. Okay.
The amount of calls coming in and going out.
All right. Well, let's see if we may be able to use your statement for this. If you go back to page 7 of your statement and you look at the paragraph we were looking at before, 2/3 of the way down the page this time, after your reference to Joanne going around the control room, you say, at the same time, I asked a control operator to speak to the incident ground via radio to inform them that the advice from control and duty DAC, that was you, was that we needed to change the stay put advice. Now that's what you put in your statement.
Yes.
So you do have a recollection about that communication, at least, do you?
So yes, when me and Joanne came to that decision, there were. I know I spoke to the incident ground, but I can't confirm that it was Steve West, and I can't confirm who that was. I did ask a radio operator, and I think it was Peter May, but I can't be 100% because I was standing quite close to him at the time, to make sure that information went across to the incident ground. I told Jason Olive to ensure that that went across to the CU that he was dealing with.
Right.
And also I spoke to AC Richard Mills, who was in the Commissioners Group, to make, which is not on the incident ground, by the way, is at headquarters, and to make sure that he was aware so he could inform the Commissioners Group that that is the decision that had been taken.
Right. You told
Sorry, a
Richard
lot of
Mills.
information there, but they were just my recollection of...
So you had your own call, did you, with Richard Mills?
So I spoke to Richard Mills. Now, whether Richard Mills and I spoke continuously throughout the night, he was ringing me, I was ringing him, whether it was just happened that he rang me at that time and I said, by the way, I was about to ring you, this is what's happening, or it was a specific call that I rang him.
Right.
Like I say, I think I had over 100 phone calls coming in and out that night, and
Okay.
to recall individual ones, unfortunately, before 3 o'clock, where I started to have a log, is difficult.
Where was Richard Mills based throughout the night when you
He
were
was at
speaking to him?
headquarters
Right.
in the Commissioners Group.
Okay. And how did you speak to him? What mechanism?
Mobile phone, his mobile and my mobile phone.
Brigade mobiles?
Yes.
Right, I see. And those calls, would they be recorded?
No.
No. Okay. So you spoke to him. You say that the bottom of the page, and I'm going to come back to the paragraph above in a moment, but you say the information was then relayed on to Assistant Commissioner Andy Rowe by the command unit. I have found out since that Andy Rowe made the same decision at a similar time, but that information didn't come to me on the night of the fire. The decision to change advice between myself, Joanne, and Andy must have been within minutes of each other. Now, just on relaying it, how was the information relayed to Assistant Commissioner Rowe?
So, as I mentioned before, I would suggest, and I believe it's through the conversation, it would have been through the conversation I had with Charlie Uniform 8, and
Right.
through the speaking to the operator, whether it was Steve West, who was the group manager and was on the command unit, or whether it had been a command unit operative, I couldn't confirm.
So, apart from speaking to Richard Mills about the change in stay put advice, is there anybody else outside the control room that you spoke to about that change?
No, apart from the control operator to send the information. I spoke to the CU8 command unit. I spoke to Jason Olive to see for it to go to CU7, and Richard Mills. So I would suggest at that point they were the four.
So when you say the information was then relayed onto Assistant Commissioner Andy Rowe by the command unit, do you have first-hand knowledge of that, or is that an assumption?
No, that's an assumption that once that, and once you give the information to the command unit would relay that straight onto the incident commander.
Right. Before the actual final decision was taken to change the stay put advice, was there any discussion with either Assistant Commissioner Rowe or the Commissioners Group about whether the advice should be changed?
Not a conversation I had, no.
Was there a conversation that you knew about to that effect?
No.
In a similar vein, did you or anybody else, to your knowledge, have any discussions with Assistant Commissioner Rowe or anybody else on the incident ground about how the change in advice would be communicated to people still in the building?
No, not that I'm aware of. Apart from the information came from us in control, and that the advice from, which I believe the message was that the advice from control is that we will be telling residents, if they can, to leave the building.
Do you know, or did you know, as a matter of policy, whose ultimate decision it would be to change advice to FSG callers?
I believe in 790 that's control's decision. However, an incident commander can make that decision in correspondence with control.
If you look at 790, if we can, just for a moment, see if this assists. It's at tab 5 of the bundle, policy bundle. I just want to look at paragraph 8 with you, which you'll find on page 5. And looking at 8.7, it says, in exceptional circumstances, an IC, incident commander, may consider informing control that their advice to FSG callers should be altered, for example, to attempt to leave their property. The IC should remember that this advice may be contrary to national policy for control staff on FSGs, and liaison with the officer in charge at the control will be required for agreement to change the prescriptive advice. Now, it looks from that in fact the decision to change the advice is one made by the incident commander, but that it should be changed with the through liaison with the officer in charge in control.
So yes.
No.
So when we communicated, we said the advice from control is that we want to change the stay put policy, and as I say, the conversation I had with the command unit, that the OIC at the time was comfortable with us doing that.
Right.
So that was part of that conversation. That may be the conversation you mentioned with Steve West, but like I say, I really can't confirm who I had that conversation with.
Right. So in the normal course of things, if you were following policy, is this right, that actually it would be for the incident commander to decide to change the stay put advice?
It says in exceptional circumstances.
Yes, yes. Well, in normal exceptional circumstances.
Yes.
Do you see what I mean? In
Yes,
other words,
no.
exceptional circumstances contemplated by the policy. It would be for the incident commander to tell control that the advice should change, but that would then be done in liaison with with control.
Yes.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be for control to make that decision themselves.
No, but like I say, we spoke to the incident commander, and they were happy with the advice that we were giving you. That was the decision to be made.
Right. Now, just finalising this particular run of questions, if you look at the bottom of page 7, you say, I have found out since that Andy Rowe came to the... I'm so sorry. I have found out since that Andy Rowe made the same decision at a similar time, but that information did not come to me on the night of the fire. Can you tell us what you're referring to about Andy Rowe's separate but identical decision?
So, follow it after the incident. So this is several weeks after having a discussion with Andy Rowe himself, that decision was logged on the command unit, and that he had made that decision himself as well. So that was information that I'd received.
Right.
after speaking to him direct.
Why have you concluded that it was the same decision at a similar time, as opposed to simply him logging the decision that he made based on your input?
I have no specific timelines. I have no specific log for that period of time, and I've just looked at what Andy Rowe's done, what we done in control, and they seem at similar times. So I'm not saying they were done exactly at the same time. I'm saying they were done at similar times. Whether when I made that phone call to CU8 and CU8 has spoken to Andy Rowe, then Andy Rowe's agreed with that and said, I'm going to make the same agreement and made the same decision. It was logged.
Right.
But like I say, on the night, at the time, this is information I received at a later date.
Right. And you say 7 lines up from the bottom of page 7, this change in advice, which was the change in advice that you had taken in the control room, this change in advice was logged on our command unit at 02:47 hours. First of all, what do you mean by our command unit?
Ours as in London Fire Brigade, not correct, probably good terminology. So I would say, I mean CU8.
So you're saying CU8, right. Now, how do you know that the change in advice was logged on at CU8 at 2:47?
Because that was a conversation that I'd had after the incident before making my statement.
Where did you get the time 2:47 from? Do you know?
No, I can't remember exactly where that
Did somebody tell you that?
Sorry?
Did somebody tell you?
Yes, someone's told me that it was logged on the command at 2:47, so whether, I'm not sure where or what time, who gave me that information.
Where would it be logged on the command unit?
I would suggest by Andy Rowe's personal logist, if he had a logist on the...
Did you know about a personal logist?
I knew he had a logist. Obviously, speaking to officers, I know some of the roles that some of the officers played or took part in after the incident.
Did you see the log created by his logist?
No.
Do you know the name of his logist?
No, I don't.
Does the name Jackie McConaughey ring any bells?
I know Jackie McConaughey, but I wouldn't know if she was the logist or not on the night.
You didn't? Right, okay. Looking at the short incident log at page 23, we can look at that page. We can see that at 02:44:18, there's an informative message from CU8 that Assistant Commissioner Rowe is now IC. But we don't see any message at 2:47, or indeed at all, about changing the FSG advice and departing from stay put. Do you know why that might be?
No, I don't.
Do you know why the change would be logged, or might be logged, on CU8 by the personal logist of AC Rowe, but not make its way onto the incident log?
No, I mean, I wouldn't have been party to that conversation, so I'm not sure whether that information came back to control or whether that was logged on the command unit or whether that was how that information came across.
Now, going back to your statement...
Are we going to another topic?
We're finishing off this one.
Right, sorry.
If that's all right, Mr. Chairman, can I just finish this off and we can take a short break? If that's all right. You say in the last sentence of that paragraph we've been looking at on page 7 of your statement, I do feel that the actual decision in control was made earlier than 2:47, but there was a delay in recording this decision due to communications with the command unit, radio traffic and logging. Do you remember there being a delay between your discussion and decision as between you and Joe Smith and speaking to the command unit about stay put and changing it?
No, so the discussion I had with Joan Smith, I know, was quite shortly after I arrived at control. So 0247 is, in my memory, is far too late in the timings of where I came. Where I say that a delay in recording and this decision due to communications is just purely by the time me and Joe have had this conversation, then I've spoken to the control operator, or spoken to the command unit. By the time the information has gone through the relevant, that's the delay in the communications, I mean.
Right. We put the conversation earlier, when you and I were discussing this, between 2:30 and Steve Leader turning on, and you seeing Steve Leader and the television being on downstairs, and 2:42, which was the informative message, so that 12-minute period, which is when you had the discussion. If the decision really was logged at 2:47 on CU8, as you say, then the delay would have been no more than 5 minutes.
It's possible.
Right. Okay. So we've got the decision really down to, in terms of timing, sometime between 2:30 and 2:47.
I would say, yeah, that's
as the outer limits.
That's the outer limits. I'd say that's fairly accurate.
Mr. Chairman, is that a convenient moment?
Yes, if it suits you.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
I think we'll have a short break now.
Okay.
We'll return at 3:20. Just over 10 minutes. Please don't talk to anyone about your evidence, all right?
Thank you.
So you'd like to go with the usher. Thank you. 3:20 then, please. Thank you. Mr. Fenton?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Millett, when you're ready.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fenton, can I just ask you one or two little detailed questions? First of all, on the subject we were on a minute ago, do you remember seeking the Commissioner's permission or agreement to change the stay put advice?
No, I don't.
You don't. Do you remember thinking that you might need to seek the Commissioner's permission to change the stay put advice?
No, that would have gone through the incident commander.
Right. I see. Who was who? Andy Rowe?
Yes, if the timings are right, yes.
Right. So was your thinking that the stay put advice needed to be changed, you needed the permission of the Commissioner, but only the incident commander could seek it?
No, I didn't say that I needed the permission of the Commissioner. I said it would have been sought or done in conjunction with the incident commander.
So, okay. So any decision to involve the Commissioner in that decision, who would have made that decision? Sorry, that's a bad question. Can I just rephrase the question?
Yeah.
Who would have been involved in any decision to involve the Commissioner in the ultimate decision to change the stay put advice?
If it was to be escalated to the Commissioner, it would have been the incident commander who would have been at AC Road, so they would have had that discussion. But I don't remember having the conversation with the Commissioner or regarding the stay put advice.
Do you remember any delay in being told, yes, the stay put has now changed, because of having to wait for an update from the incident ground?
No, my recollection is that I had that conversation with CU8 and, as I say, whoever that was on there, and the conversation was that the incident ground agreed with our decision.
Right. Going back to your statement and about the 15th floor, on page 6 of your statement, in the middle of the page, you say that you were advised by Controller Jason Oliffe, I'm not sure which, that crews were, and then you use the word struggling to get beyond the 15th floor of the tower. And on the next page, on page 7, you say, in the middle of the page, that the crews were unable to get above the 15th floor. I think some people are interested in whether there's a difference. Were they struggling but could, or were they completely unable to?
I think that's just the words that I've used in the statement, that I've used two different words for the same sentence.
Right. To express what?
Well, as far as I can remember, the information that I received back, that crews were struggling to get past the 15th floor. So where I've put unable, I think that should be struggling.
So do you mean some could, but most couldn't, or none could? What do you mean?
I had no further information other than that statement.
In terms of the system for whiteboards and recording the information, was there a system, do you know, that was in place for what would happen if a child called seeking assistance? Was that something that you recorded specifically? No. Was that something that you asked Jason Oliffe to institute, to record specifically?
I wasn't made aware on the night that there was any children actually making the calls or on the phones.
Right. Okay. After the decision was made to change the stay put advice, did you ask for any update or advice from the incident ground as to the conditions in the lobbies and the stair?
No, not at that time. So I spoke directly to, as I say, CU8, passed that information closely after that time, I probably spent a bit, started to go down to the BCC as well, because that was starting to come up.
Right. The effect, according to your statement, the effect of changing the stay put advice was that now people would be told to get out of the tower. That is effectively what you say 3/4 of the way down page 7. Now, I don't want to be unfair to you. That's what you say in your statement, but
Yes.
is that right?
That's what I put in my statement. So, like I've mentioned previously, so Joan Smith and Alex Newman would have gone round to their control operators, spoken to their control operators, given them that we had changed the stay put, and they would have given them the advice on how to speak to the individuals on the end of the phones.
Right.
I wouldn't have been party to that.
No. To your understanding, though, the gist of the advice was get out of the tower.
If you can get out the tower, get out the tower.
Well, if you can't get out, well, that sounds as if you're giving callers, or your understanding was that callers were being given a choice.
My understanding, I can't give you the information that was given across by control, or how that was working in control. So my understanding was that we're changing the stay put advice, so those that could leave the tower were told to leave the tower. If there was further information or further discussions with the FSG information, that would have taken part between the control operators and the individuals. I wouldn't have been party to that information.
Okay. Assuming that the gist of the new advice post-change was get out of the tower, did you think that it would be important, or at least helpful, to the control room operators giving that new advice to know what the conditions were in the building, lobbies and stairs particularly, to be able to assist callers get out?
I would say they were probably getting that advice via the phone call, but not advice, they were getting that information from the people on the other end of the phone. I mean, yes, if we could, to be able to give a control operator the information of every single floor, area, flat, how dense, where the smoke is, I think it's a virtual impossibility. You're talking 24 floors, X amount of flats. No, I don't think anyone's got that information to pass that information back.
So far as you were aware, were CROs being instructed to ask the callers to describe the conditions they were encountering once they left their place?
You're asking me questions that I'm sorry, I can't give you those answers because I wasn't party to that part of control. I was not with the call operators.
Right. Were you able to get information from the incident ground as to how crews were going to be able to assist FSG callers get out of the tower pursuant to the new advice?
That would have been worked out on the incident ground by the command unit and the incident commander. That's the strategy that they would have done on the incident ground.
Yes. And having arrived at the strategy on the incident ground, did you get any information from the incident ground about what BA wearers, now EDBA wearers, were going to be doing by way of assisting people to get out?
No.
Did you not think that information was important to get out from the incident ground?
It wasn't information that was coming back to us. So it wasn't being... It's as a duty DAC, and the role and the position I played, it's not a role that I would be asking the incident ground for updates and information. Like I say, my role was to run the BCC. I was working additionally to assist in the position of the fire survival guards, but it's not a role that I would be asking the incident ground for updates on the positions and where they are. It's not a role that a duty DAC would play.
All right. But you were there in the control room on the night and supervising Mr. Oliph's communication with the incident ground. Did you not think that it would be important for him or somebody in the control room to get information from the incident ground as to what the EDBA wearers were doing, so that in relation to particular calls, that advice could be passed on to assist people get out?
So that information could have been coming back to control, it could have been coming back, but I wasn't privy to that information at the time, because, like I say, it's not a position I would have dealt with.
Right. Now, in terms of communication systems, have you ever heard of a CSS, a command support system?
Yes.
Did you know that on the night the or a command support system on one of the CUs failed?
No.
You didn't know that?
No. But as I've mentioned before, in my role in the BCC, that information would not be coming back to me. It's not protocol for that information, operational information from the incident ground to come back to the duty DAC. It's not. It wouldn't have flowed back to me.
Right. Would the command support system be useful in assisting the fire ground to communicate with the control room if it was working?
No, I don't think so, because communications would have come across the airwave.
Right. Can I then go back to a different topic, but one we looked at a little bit earlier, which was the dangerous structure engineer. Now, we looked at the short incident log earlier. If I can just ask you to go back to that. It's tab 23 of the documents bundle. And I'd ask you to look at page 23, please. Now, we looked at the message earlier, I think at 0238, for the dangerous structure engineer. And I think you said you didn't know about that message.
Not at that time, no.
No. And then there's another one at 3:15:32, which you see on page 24. 3:15:32. CU8 request urgent attendance of dangerous structure engineer and stress this is a matter of urgency and priority. Did you see that message, do you think?
No, I didn't see that message, but as I mentioned, I'm not sure of the timing. Someone in control requested that was I happy in the role of the Duke DAC and BCC for a dangerous structure engineer to be blue lighted to the incident ground, which is what I agreed to be done.
Right.
So that would have, sorry to cut across, that would have meaning either a police to run them to the incident ground or for us to find an officer to take them to the incident ground. I'm not sure which one it was finally agreed, but in principle I agreed for it to be done.
There's another message at 03:31:04. We just look at that. Another service, this says service request completed. AG, EMG, CU8, request dangerous structure engineer. Do you remember that request?
The only request regarding the dangerous structure engineer that came to me is the one via a verbal conversation down in the BCC from a member of control to blue light someone to the incident ground.
Right.
Unfortunately, that is my only dealing with the dangerous structure engineer.
Okay, and I'm sorry to labour this a bit, but look at the next page, page 25. It says 03:37:32, key, EMG, CU8, reference dangerous structure engineer. Can we have an ETA and a contact number to speak with them directly and to let us know if they need blue light assistance to get to the incident as they are a priority? Did you see that message?
No.
Is that the at the time, does that help? Is that the time, do you think, that you were first asked?
Potentially. I don't know what time I've put. Is that, I think if you refer back to my statement, I had a logist at that time. Yes. And I believe so. If my logist had put that in at that time, then that would be the period or the time that I authorised it. However, once it's come to me to authorise, then I wouldn't be following it up after I'd authorised it. I would expect someone to action it and for it to take place.
When you were asked to authorise the blue lighting of a dangerous structure engineer to Grenfell Tower, were you made aware that the request for a dangerous structure engineer had been outstanding for some time?
No.
Okay. If you go to page 26, there is another message at 040127. LRG responded and informed to contact Kensington and Chelsea, re Borough Surveyor, dangerous structure engineer. Now this is just after 4 a.m. Do you know anything about that?
No.
Did you know that someone had said that Kensington and Chelsea needed to be contacted in order to get a dangerous structure engineer there?
So, as I previously said, you're asking me a lot of information via the incident log. However, unless it comes to me in my role as the Brigade Coordinating Manager in the BCC, I wouldn't be aware of some of the operational decisions because I'll be running the BCC. If that helps in...
Yeah. And you say in your statement on page 8, a third of the way down, that you authorised the engineer to be blue lighted to the scene.
And has that got a time?
Well, you say that it's in effect in response to the informative message at 3:20. So my question is, having shown you the message at 0401, did you follow up what happened to the dangerous structure engineer?
No, it wouldn't be a role for me to follow. So I'm there to help resource the incident, and if the incident asks for a resource or asks them to be blue lighted, I'm there to help provide the resources, not to make operational decisions or not to follow up decisions on the incident ground.
I see. Okay.
So being, as we say, being remote, the decisions and the operational decisions are made by the incident commanders and the command chain on the incident ground.
Right. Now, there's one point of clarification that I've been asked to just put to you about a particular piece of information which I asked you about earlier in relation to a particular flat, which was flat 194. And to be fair to you, it is right that you be shown the full story about it. If you go to INQ 50195, this is an admin call timed at 02 o'clock and 34 seconds, relating to a series of flats, one of which is 194. And if you scroll down, or have scrolled down the pages, which pages are they? To page 5, this is an admin call, a recording of somebody speaking to CU8 at just after 2 a.m. And there's flat 194, operator flat 194, CU8, can you do that, mate? Right, and then operator, that's a pensioner with heavy smoke there. So you said that's floor 22. What was that? That's a pensioner, heavy smoke, and it's flat 194. Now, I put flat 194 to you based on the pieces of paper
So when you say operator, sorry if I can ask the question, do you mean a control operator?
Yes. Yes, I do. And then I've got a couple of questions about that, but I just want to make sure I've put fairly to you the evidence we have on flat 194, although I used it as an example. If you go to the whiteboard and look at what we were using as the left-hand side, which I think is the second one to be filled in, which is 16912, page 1. You can see flat 194 information. 194, 22nd floor, heavy smoke, 1 adult. Nothing on the board there about a pensioner, but it does look, from the admin call that was made to CU8, that the identification of that individual as a pensioner did get through. Now, having seen that, given that it doesn't seem to be that information on the pieces of paper that we've seen, nothing about pensioner in 194 on the piece of paper or on the whiteboard, can you help in explaining how that piece of information about the occupant being a pensioner got through?
I mean, that was taken before I was even in control, the original information. You say it was at 2 o'clock in the morning?
Right. Now, in terms of the system that you came to when you arrived,
yes,
we can see this particular call. It looks as if it's an operator speaking to CU8
yes,
over something that is recording their conversation but is not a radio. Can you help with what that system was?
No. Sorry, I don't know what control would use. I mean, if it was over the RT, which is airwave channel 4, I believe that's recordable or that's put onto the system. If it wasn't that, unfortunately, no, I don't know what system.
What about the brigade landlines? The telephone lines that are used.
Some of those may be recordable in control, but I wouldn't.
You don't know.
I wouldn't have that. I wouldn't know. Like I say, not being my environment and where I work, I wouldn't have that detail.
Okay. Right. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Olive. You'll be relieved to hear that I have no further questions for you.
Okay.
I just want to
Mr.
say,
Fenton, I hope, not Mr. Olive.
I'm so sorry, Mr. He's quite right, Mr. Fenton. Of course, I'm sorry about that. Nonetheless, I'm still very grateful to you for enduring my questions and enduring getting your name wrong at the last moment. And thank you very much for your assistance. It's been extremely helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Mr. Fenton, it just remains for me to thank you very much as well for coming along. I don't suppose it's been an entirely pleasant experience, but
no, but I hope it's helped, and I hope
it certainly has. It's
filled
helped
the
a
gaps.
lot, and we're very grateful to you for coming along. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Right, if you'd like to go, you can follow the usher. She'll see you later. Now, Mr. Millett.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Now then, we did have, as people I think know, Angie Gotts, a control room operator, scheduled to give evidence tomorrow. Unfortunately, we've discovered that she is unwell this week and cannot attend. We hope to be able to have her come along at some stage or to give her evidence in some way, and that will obviously have to be discussed and the schedule revised. In order to be able to use the day productively, Mr. Chairman, we are going to propose that a number of statements get read into the record, yes. 5 of them, namely Alexandra Norman, Debbie Real, Peter May, Peter Duddy and Sarah Russell. I should just make one point clear, and that is that by reading these statements into the record, that doesn't preclude the witness from giving evidence in due course. And indeed, the inquiry is actively considering this question at the moment. The statements are being read into the record tomorrow so as to provide the necessary context for that evidence from other control room personnel who are going to come later, and the evidence that has been heard over the last few days from Ms. Smith, Mr. Olive and Mr. Fenton. We are also going to hear from Mr. Keane tomorrow live.
And shall we take Mr. Keane first at 10 o'clock?
We'll take Mr. Keane first at 10 o'clock. And,
yes, right.
And you'll have my colleague, Mr. Kinnear, taking Mr. Keane through his evidence.
Good. Right, and that's it. Otherwise, that's it for
Yes,
today.
Mr. Chairman, that's the business for the day.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Right. Well, thank you very much. Well, we're going to break now then. We'll resume at 10 o'clock tomorrow when we...
Mr. Chairman, before we do, I'm so sorry, there's a signal from the floor, which I, in my usual way, will entertain. What? No, we didn't. We didn't. There's a reason for that.
That's it, is it?
That is now it.
Right. Well, as I said then, we shall break now and we'll resume at 10 o'clock tomorrow when we shall hear from Mr. Keane.
Yes. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. Thank you.